if you're able to text your mic. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Life Her Podcast. I am excited about today's show. Today we are going to be talking to Dr. Rita Fierro. Just going to take just a second to let a few more people get in this room. This is a heavy topic today, and I am super excited to see what she has to say to us today. First things first, let me introduce myself. I am a new member of the Life Her podcast team. My name is Janai Levon, and I'm excited coming to you by way of Arizona. Whoop, whoop. Excited to be talking to Dr. Fierro today so that we can get into some heavy stuff. She's got a lot of stuff to talk about that I'm sure everybody is interested in hearing about. And she's got some pretty cool stuff to share with us. So go ahead and share this live and tell your friends about it. Let's get this party going. Don't forget to like her podcast on Facebook and Instagram if you haven't already. All right. Hope everybody's doing well today. Hope your day went well. We're going to get Dr. Rita up here in just a second. All right. So also feel free to comment and like. Hello, hello, good evening. I'm seeing some of you are already commenting and saying hello. So hello to everyone. All right, so let's go ahead and get Dr. up. Uh, All right, and here she is. Here she is. Hello, hello, hello. Let me get you
Hi,
unmuted. Hi.
Jenny. It's great.
All right. Let's see if we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Can hear you just fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, welcome, Dr. Rita. I'm super excited to have you on the Life Her podcast today. Excited to talk about some of the very important subjects that you are bringing to the table today. Can you just give us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and tell us who you are and some of the things that you're into that we'll be talking about today?
Sure. I'm Dr. Rita Fierro. I've been trained as a sociologist, and I have a PhD in African American Studies, and I've been an evaluator for the past 30 years, which means that I get hired by programs to see how effective they are and what they're up to, and trying to measure success in a way that resonates with the people who are actually doing the work. Um, and I have a book coming out, so I'm an author.
Okay.
And what I really focus on is the bridge between systemic racism and personal healing work. So I've also done a lot of that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm excited about the work that you're doing. So, can you give us a little bit about your background, your childhood, and just we want to get to know who Dr. Rita is and how you come to this point of your life with doing such amazing work.
I was born in the Bronx, and when I from Italian parents who were born and raised in Italy. I'm the first generation not raised on a farm in my family. And when I was 10, my parents decided to move to Italy, going back to their hometown, which was small town Italy. I generally say it was 3,000 inhabitants, including the sheep. So you can
Oh,
imagine that
wow.
even for a 10-year-old, like moving from New York City and the mentality of New York City to small town Italy was really it was traumatic and it was really tough for me. And Italians have a
Wow.
love-hate relationship with America. So I experienced prejudice. I experienced feeling misunderstood. I experienced kind of culture shock. And my parents were working class folk, and they were coming back home, so they didn't quite have the language to. They were fish going back to their water, right? So they couldn't really explain to me what was happening. And I guess I became a passionate about culture in the process of trying to sort my way through this absolutely new environment where I basically
Yeah.
knew nothing and understood nothing. I had to find my way through.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. And I think this is so important too because a lot of the times when we talk about racism, we are normally talking about racism as it relates to African Americans. But racism is such a broad spectrum. And
Mhm.
so I'm excited, that you're able to share a part of that diversity in, racism and just what that looks like as a whole. Um, and I notice a lot, of course, your topic is systemic racism and white supremacy. Can you give me your definition of like what that looks like and why is that so important to you to bring light to it?
Yeah, definition of white supremacy and systemic racism. Is that your question? Are
Yes,
those the two things you want me to define? Okay.
yes,
Um, so oftentimes when we think about white supremacy, we think about the hardcore nationalists that are on the front lines, right? So we think about the KKK or um, Knights of White. Anyway, I don't want to name them because I don't want to give them any free publicity. There's some new ones that have been rising and have taken a lot of space in the media. I prefer to not name them. But we generally think about these hardcore folks. We think about burning crosses. We think about death. Um, the take I have on white supremacy is that it's something much more pervasive and insidious, and it's something that we all are carrying because it's an integral part of the culture we're raised in. And it's this constant attempt to be superior to prove our value. In indigenous cultures, human beings were valuable just because we existed, right? The inherent dignity and value of every human being was not questioned. Instead, in the system of white supremacy, we've become accustomed to, that famous question, what do you do? As an opening question at the average cocktail party comes because we already want to find out from the beginning, are you worth my time? Are you valuable enough that I'm going to invest time in talking to you? Or are you low enough on the class social status spectrum that I should be investing my time elsewhere because we're all trying to get somewhere. So that trying to
Right.
get somewhere that is when it's superior to someone else, that is my definition of white supremacy. Because supremacy is literally being
Right.
overpowering someone else. And I
Wow.
think we all have to come to terms with that. I know I do. And
Hmm.
the ways in which we all have to come to terms with that. And if, as a culture, I argue we don't eradicate that and don't create checks and balances to get honest about how that shows up in all of
yeah,
us, it's going to keep on thriving in the shadows, which is what it's doing now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. So I have a question for you. When did you become passionate about the topics like that? I know you said that you were growing up in that atmosphere and you've experienced it yourself. So was that when you were like, I want to shed some light on this, I want to do something more to make people more aware of this? Or when was it that you knew that this was something that you wanted to create a platform to educate others about these issues?
The first moment of awareness that wasn't an awareness of a platform, but was an awareness that there was an integral part of my purpose was
Okay.
at 19. So we had had a family function, and someone made some racist comments at the family function. And the person who made the racist comments was a person who had played a really, really important part in my political identity.
Mm,
It was a person who had been really active politically. My family had not been politically active. And so this person had really instilled in me the values of being in office, of opposition, the importance of standing in your values, the importance of voting, um, the
yeah.
importance of class identity, and having the experience of this person um, making racist comments was earth shattering for me because this was a role model. And so I've suddenly saw my role model kind of fall in front of my
Wow.
eyes.
Yeah.
Um, and I had the reaction that I've always had to racist comments, which is that I went and closed myself in the bathroom for a while and
Mm,
felt sick to my stomach and
yeah.
cried and felt like vomiting. And that's happened many times. It happened many times before. I always had, ever since I was a little girl, my first memory of this was like being 5. I always felt racism to me always felt like, although I was always white, always
Mhm.
felt like someone had punched my stomach. Like I
Wow.
always felt like, uh, and
Yeah.
that if I were to suppress it, it would be suppressing a part of me. And so I expressed it, but I did it in a bathroom.
Right. So like
Um,
you had to get it out, but wasn't
yeah,
quite ready to get it out in front of other people. I get
exactly.
that.
And so that day, with tears in my eyes, I washed my face, I looked myself in the mirror, and I said, you know what, Rita? Clearly, it doesn't hurt other people the way it hurts you. So
Yeah.
they're not going to change this. If it
Yeah.
hurts you, you need to do something about it. Go do
Wow.
something.
Right. And that sounds much like purpose to me,
Yeah.
because the thing that I feel like is sitting heaviest on you the most, I feel like that's your purpose. Like the thing that you can't stop thinking about, the thing that, keeps you up at night, or the thing that you can go on and on and on about. That's something that you should be purpose driven about. And so, I myself have experienced a form of racism, especially in the workplace. And I can identify with that feeling that you're talking about. It just kind of like takes you aback, and it almost kind of makes you feel dehumanized, when
Mhm.
someone treats you some kind of different way for no other reason other than your ethnicity, or the color of your skin, or your background of some sort, religious or whatever. It's such a horrible feeling. So I can identify with what you're saying. But I think it's so important too, Dr. Rita, that you're shedding this light. Even for me, I'll be honest, I'm happy to hear your perspective coming from, someone that's other than African American, that kind of broadens it for everybody. Like, this is not just a one-sided issue, right? Like, there's so many people that like experience this, and so many people, we're all human, right? We're one race. And so that feeling is universal, right? Nobody wants to experience it. So coming from you, I think you have such a powerful platform right now and voice, for everybody to be able to talk about these things from your point of view, and from your personal life experiences and what you've even been educated on. So I applaud you for, taking one for the team. Even though I know that it's a passion because of your experiences, I just really applaud you because I know that it can't be easy, you know, standing up for such a topic, being of the ethnicity that you're in. And with that being said, can I ask you, have you experienced some backlash for, just being so passionate about these issues?
Yes, always.
Yeah.
um I lost so because I that first part of my life was in New York, like I
Hmm.
lost people and that part of my life was very white and very white middle class New York life.
Okay.
Um or white middle class Bronx life at the time.
Yeah.
I was taught and trained to say we were from the North Bronx, right? Because God forbid we
Hmm.
get associated with South Bronx that was predominantly Black and Latino. But I lost most of the people that were part of that childhood part of my journey. Like I
Hmm.
lived in Italy for 15 years. And then when I came back to the United States, I had all these fantasies of this 10-year-old that I was going to find all these people that I loved so much. And because I
Yeah.
had left America, I idealized America, right? So when
Mm.
I came back, I thought there was going to be all this family and this love to welcome me.
Yeah.
And by then, my degree had already focused on anti-racism and immigration. And when the people who were points of reference for me in my childhood discovered that was my passion, I lost
Mm.
most of them. So
Wow.
there are two that are still in, but I lost most of the people that were part of my childhood. I wasn't able to kind of reconnect with them in a variety of ways. Um, and I also want to say this though,
Hmm.
that see, I stand in the fact that racism hurts all of us,
Yeah.
which doesn't. I'm not comparing pain, right? I
Hmm.
think I think white people, we as white folk, have to come to terms with the harm we've done,
Hmm.
and that's part of the work. There's
Okay.
also the part of the work that I think has to be done is for us to look ourselves in the mirror and see what harm was done to us that made it okay for us to harm others.
Mm. Wow.
Because if I haven't been harmed, I have no reason to harm you,
Wow.
right?
That's a great point.
Right?
Hurt
So
people hurt people.
exactly. So what was done to us that made it okay for us to hurt others and not feel the hurt? And I would argue that um, most children can
Hmm.
feel something is wrong when racism shows up in a conversation, but it gets
Exactly.
beaten out of us. So as white people, we are trained to uphold the system. So we're trained to not rock the boat, and we are punished for speaking our truth. So to the extent of you saying, have people retaliated? Yes. And I'm
Hmm.
sure many more will.
Hmm.
It's just part of the journey.
Exactly.
And it's at the point where it would be more painful for me not to speak.
Wow. That's awesome. I have to applaud you on that. That's awesome. Just because so many people feel how you feel and experience what you've experienced, but it's safer to be silent. And so,
And it's not safer though. Like
right.
it's safer to this body. It's not
Exactly.
safer to our hearts, and it's not
Yeah.
safer to who we are because
Yeah.
we die inside every day a little bit more.
Yeah.
So
And that,
if you look at the rates of suicide, so a great comparison that I
hmm,
often use. If you look at the suicide rates for young white folk, they're
hmm,
as high as the homicide rates for young children of color.
wow.
It's still violence. It's
Yeah.
just differently expressed. It's like you're expressing it at your brother versus you're expressing it at yourself.
On yourself.
So
Right.
we're dying inside anyway. If we look at the rates of mental health increase, the rate of divorce increase,
Hmm.
the rate of stress and trauma, and we're not doing well. I've written an article that says white people ain't free. We would not be behaving this way if we were free.
That's so good, Dr. Rita. So good. You are really making some great points that I might add I haven't even thought of. Um, just on that perspective. That's why I'm so super excited about this interview. Um, but I also noticed, I took a little look on your page that you have some blogs where you kind of expound more on these topics and more. I think you have two blogs.
I write articles on Medium.
Okay.
I have a blog where I do kind of work kind of things, consulting things. And
Mm-hmm.
then I have more of a personal blog that I've been writing more frequently. It's like a 100-day challenge. I've been challenging myself to write every day,
Okay.
um, because it allows me to share more raw thoughts instead of trying to have my white perfectionism kick in and have
Right.
10 people revise everything before I put it out there because if it's not perfect. So I've been playing with just sharing kind of more raw thoughts, and that's the personal blog.
Nice. And so, how long have you been doing this work again?
We'll define this work.
So, just speaking out on social injustice and racism, white supremacy, all of those things.
Yeah. I think it's been my walk since, as I said, like since
That's good.
19, since I started studying in sociology. Oh Lord, if you listen to my mom would say, ever since nursery school. Like, right? So she has stories about how I was very protective of the people I loved even back then.
Wow.
And I always tended to take the side of the underdog. Um,
Hmm.
but in terms of being this outspoken around white supremacy, and in particular how race harms us, white
Yeah.
folk, um, I would say a couple of years. And mainly because I think it's taken me 30 years to
Yeah.
be able to articulate, okay, what is it that I have to say
Hmm.
that is valuable given my journey and given what's being experienced right now.
Yeah.
It took me, I think for 30 years, I just studied and hid a little bit. And I
Yeah.
think it's also because I needed to do some of my own healing work before I could um, deliver a message from the best of me,
Right.
deliver a message beyond my personal fears, like the fear of retaliation you mentioned before. Like that held me back
Mhm.
for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And I've done some work, so that's not there right now. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think this outspoken is probably fairly new. The people who know me have known me for some time have heard me speak more privately or smaller audiences.
Mhm.
This book, Digging Up the Seas, was such a journey of transformation for me where I had to look myself in the mirror and had to see some
Mhm.
hard truths about the way I've internalized white supremacy as much as I didn't want to.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's also brought a different kind of boldness.
Awesome. So, perfect segue to your book, which was next on my list of things to ask you about. So exciting. You have a book coming out this month. You want to go ahead and
Yay!
just tell us, yay, let's celebrate you.
Yay! I
Let's
have a
go ahead
copy here
and
too.
have you talk about that. You have it with you? You want to hold
Yeah,
it
I
up?
do. I have a copy I can show you.
Okay.
This is a proof. It's going to be reprinted because it has some.
Okay.
But digging up the seeds of white supremacy. Um, this book is a combination of a historical journey into what were the intentions that were embedded in the systems that make them so hard to change. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I use the analogy of the tree and the seeds, and I say,
Yeah.
if you know the seeds, the fruits won't surprise you, right? And I argue that we've been pruning the tree, and that's why everything we've done to dismantle systemic racism over the past years hasn't worked because we're pruning the tree. We're actually making it stronger unwillingly. We just
Wow.
cut back branches for the short term and then they come back stronger
Come
every
back
time.
stronger.
So one of the things this book does is a journey back into history, looking at 10 different systems and how
Hmm.
they're all connected and how they all adapt and resist change in similar ways.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also a look at the soil. Like, what is the trees don't live 600 years or almost 600 years on their own. They have to be nurtured. So what is the nurturing in our culture that happens? And how did I see that in me? So how
Mm,
do those seeds of fear, which is basically the backbone of the whole system, show up in me? And in particular, the journey of COVID and the journey of reconciliation with my family, um, that has really put wind in my sails about being able to be fearless. It's like once you reconcile with your folk, then you can like go do anything out in the world. So it's both
right.
it's all both a book of personal reconciliation and personal
Mhm.
practice, and a historical view on this is the beast. If we're going to change it, we need to know how it works.
Right. That's so good. So good. And I know we talked about backlash from like other white people, with what you're doing, but have you received any backlash from other cultures, African Americans, or any other ethnicities that you are speaking about?
I don't know if I would call that backlash.
Okay.
It's kind of like so I stand by the principle that black folk can't be racist, because racism isn't just personal.
Mhm.
Racism is it's an upholding of institutions to a personal dislike, right, and to the pretext of inferiority, so or superiority. So in any other words, if you don't like me, right,
Mhm.
and you decide to taunt me on the internet, it's very unlikely that the police are going to come knock on my door because of it, right?
Right.
But if I do that to you, you may
Mhm.
walk away with a fear of the whole society turning against you. And you, if there's a false claim, that there could be like huge repercussions because our systems are designed
Yeah.
to dismiss the misactions of people who look like me and to punish those that look
Exactly.
like of people that look like you, right?
Yeah.
So when you talk about backlash by African Americans, I would say, yeah, I mean, there are people who um, believed for a long time ago that I didn't need to be in this work, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I have a PhD in African American Studies, so there are people who thought that I didn't have any business being in the department. But I mean, it's a dislike, right? It just means that we sat at different lunch counters, or
Mhm.
we didn't have much of conversations and we didn't have a deep relationship. But they
Yeah.
didn't really harm me, so I wouldn't call it backlash. I would
Yeah.
just say, yeah, there are people who have opinions about everything, and of course that too.
Take it personal.
Yeah.
Because I think it comes from just fear of the unknown, of the intention, you know?
Well, and there's also I think it's more than the fear of the known. There's history, right? So
Right.
um, there's a lot of fear in the African American community that someone who looks like me, who's
Hmm.
walking in predominantly African American spaces, is a spy, because
Yeah.
that history exists,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Um, Now, the elders who met me over the years have told me, well, that's really interesting because it's less likely that a spy would look like you. It's more likely a spy would look like me. But the truth is that, the CIA did infiltrate organizations, and, there are documents. This is part of history now.
Yeah.
And so there's a distrust, and some of that is it's historical truth.
Yeah.
So yeah. I don't
Absolutely.
take it personally, as you said. I don't
Yeah,
take it
that's what
personally.
it sounds like. I hear you saying that
There's a
it's not
history.
something that you take personal because of the history, which I agree with that. We have some questions in the comments here. I see one that has asking, have you
Oh, now I see the
experienced?
comments. I didn't
Oh,
see
you
them
can see them.
before. Oh, wow. I was
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
people. I've been ignoring these comments all this time.
yeah. Yeah, they've been talking. And so, have you experienced hate while defending our culture? Um, I think you kind of answered that when I asked you about, the backlash for doing this work. And then the other one is asking, what do you think about when people have labeled white women as Karen. What could we do to change the false accusations, even in the police force?
Yeah. That's funny. I have phenomenal Philly musician whose name is Karen, and she's like one of the best. She's one of the best drummers in the city, and she's a black woman. And I called her the other day, and I said, "How do you feel about that?" We were talking.
All the parents, I get the
um,
bad rap.
I don't know. I mean, I think. Hmm, what do I think about it? I think I have. I tend to. I don't really care much about most things that become internet buzzes, because I don't think, again, the soil, right?
Hmm.
Like, I don't think that if we pluck a little branch of this tree, it's gonna change.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could change Carrie with Beck. I mean, before there was Karen, there was Becky, right? It was Becky with the good hair
True.
before it
With
was
the good
Karen,
hair.
right?
Right.
It was, and before Becky with it was Jill. It was Jack and Jill before then.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think that's important. I think what's
Hmm.
important uh, is the context, and the context is, yo, white women, you react stereotypically all the same, and you need to
Hmm.
question the way you react. I think that's what I hear when I hear white women called Karen, right? It's like, how stereotypically, like, if 10 people react all in the same way, and another 10 people say it's kind of absurd as you're reacting, then I need to look at that. We need to look
Yeah.
at that, right?
Because the
So
core is in the
um
heart, right?
yes, and I tend to not um polemicize things like that, because to me, at the end of the day, um that mirror is what got me on this path,
Yeah.
and that mirror is what I have to come to terms with that mirror every night and every morning.
Mm, that's good.
And ultimately, that's my standard. It's, can I look myself in the mirror and be proud of what I see? Right. And to me, at our core,
Hmm.
we all have that. And
Right.
I believe that humanity is essentially good, and that what we call evil is just like us kind of forgetting our essence. So there's an optimist perspective on that.
Yeah.
Um, False accusations by the police force. I think it's interesting you say that. I've actually worked on a project that was about building relationships between police and community for 4 years, and it's very complex. So oftentimes we talk about how police misinterpret and misperceive the community.
Hmm.
Um, and oftentimes, if you hear police talk, they feel equally misunderstood.
Yeah.
And in that project, and not that it's equal, right? Because they're
Mhm.
trained.
Right.
Um, but I think they're different. What I'm trying to say is that it's complex. So if we really want to go at it and solve it, we have to look at community's perception of police, police's perception of community. How are police trained?
Hmm.
And how is trauma, like, how many police requirements discourage police officers from reporting their trauma?
Mm.
So police officers, do you know what the first cause of death of police officers is?
No, what is it?
It's suicide.
Wow.
So if we don't create ways that these folks can say that they're carrying too much,
Hmm.
then of course they're going to flip at a second.
Yeah.
And I also am for, if we had stronger communities, we would be looking after each other, and we wouldn't, like, call the police when the next door neighbor is being beat by her husband. We'd go and give him a peace of mind ourselves, like we did in our old communities,
Yeah.
right?
Wow. That's so deep. And I mean, that just solidifies what's believed by so many people is that they carry a fear, right? even if it comes or stems from ignorance, unknown, just what they've been taught, culture, what have you, that fear can cause anxiety and pressure, which can lead to the depression and ultimately suicide. Wow, that's so deep. That's the first time that I've heard that statistic. So that is definitely something that we should know, when thinking about all of this. Wow. I think we had another question for you. Take another question. Do you think the state of racism will be better in our children's future?
Hmm. Oh my God, I want to say yes because I'm an eternal optimist.
Yeah,
Yes, and we have to do something different for that to happen.
absolutely agreed.
So,
So what can
what
we
I'm
do?
well, first, we have to be willing to learn what it's like to live beyond fear because
Hmm.
fear only, so that's the healing aspect of systemic racism. So, you asked me about systemic racism before. I
Yeah.
didn't get to define it, so I'll just do that quickly. But
Okay.
systemic racism is the way in which white supremacy, the pretext of white superiority, is embedded in all our systems, right? So the thing that people most often about is how if you get locked up for selling crack or you get locked up for selling cocaine, with crack, your sentence is going to be, before Obama, it was like 200 times more. And now we're down to, I think it's 68 times more, but it's still more,
Still a
right?
lot. Yeah.
So that's, and we know that more African Americans consume crack and more poor African Americans consume crack and more um, white upper class folks consume cocaine or more likely to, maybe not in
Mhm.
absolute numbers, but in percentages. So my stand is that systemic racism is designed for white people to not face our fears. So African Americans are raised from probably the first time they get called the N word onward, or sometimes sooner, to know that they live in a hostile world.
Mhm.
And in some way, I don't know, it's magic to me how Black mothers keep people from having open hearts in a racist environment. That's total magic to me. I have like the tremendous amount of respect for Black women who raise Black youth in this environment and this life. Um, Pause to that. But from what I hear from the folks of color I know, at an early age that the world is hostile, and yet you can't live in fear your whole life. So you learn that in some way you have to learn to be who you are in the face of the hostility, in the face of the danger, and yet walk bravely.
Yeah.
I would argue that for most African Americans, that's actually what growing up is. It's learning how to be bold and brave in the face of a hostile context. And I think for whites, what growing up means is trying to do it more perfectly, to achieve more, disrupt less, and make fewer mistakes. So we're a constant, like we have all, especially as white women, like we have all these rules in our heads,
Mhm.
which is why often in the racial justice spaces, we're always trying to say the right words at the right time and quote the right books, right? We're trying to do it right so badly because we haven't faced the fundamental fear, which is that, in life, when you are yourself, sometimes you face opposition.
Mhm.
And so, um, I think the first thing we need to do for our youth um, is to get honest about what role fear plays in our life and how we live beyond fear. Because we're going to die inside every time if we just live from fear, whatever color our skin is. And
Wow.
white
That's
folk, and
true.
I would argue that white folk are paralyzed in fear. Most white folk are. And so we need to grow up and be willing to say, like, I'm willing to stand for what is right, and I'm willing to stand in what has me be at peace with myself and has my belly not ache, no matter
Mm-hmm.
what the consequences are.
Mm. What courage. Yeah, I totally agree with everything that you're saying. Just wow, wow, wow. If you guys can send up some hearts for Dr. Rita Fierro and all of what she shared in her work. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you today. If you can, let the people know where they can stay connected with you. How can they find you? What platforms are you on? And where, oh, where can we get this book once it's ready?
Sure. Um, so you can find me on Instagram. It's Dr. Rita Writes, like DrRitawrites.
Okay.
My website is my name, Rita Fierro, Rita Fierro, Fierro.com. And then everything is there. I have a link tree. And so if you just look up my name, everything comes from there. Um, for the book, there's a purchase button on the website. The digital is pre-order is available on Amazon now, and the hard book will probably be available on Amazon in a few days. But basically, the website and the link tree are the core, like anything there. And if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll be notified as soon as it comes out.
Okay, very cool, very cool. So you all heard it. Get to her Instagram, hit that link tree, and you'll find everything that she's doing, her book, her blogs, and everything else she says is there. This was an awesome interview. Honestly, I can walk away with something. Before we let you go, if you have one last thing to tell the listeners, those that are on, those that will listen later, what would you want to leave us with?
Reconciling with our families is the
Mm,
core of anything and everything we can do out in the world, because we will always see the world through the lens of what happened with our families. Our family is the first group. It's the first political party. It's the first moving built. Like our families, mama, papa, siblings, grandparents, whoever raised you, guardians, right? Like they are the core of who we become. And
wow.
that's why I'm saying that systemic racism and healing go hand in hand, because if we don't heal the first tree we came from, right? The first nest that brought us forth, whoever that was, right? Whoever that was that nurtured us, whoever taught us to love, right? If we don't come back and nurture those seeds and come back to those connections and that love and discover that love kept us alive in the face of everything, like that's what there is for us to discover, that we were fierce in the face and we were fiercely loved in the face of all of it. And that's the strength that we draw from to have the courage and create a new world. And from that, I claim we're invincible. Like we can transform a society from there. Yes. From a place of healing, absolutely.
Woo! I felt that. Seriously. In my heart, I felt that. Our family is our first ministry. I completely and strongly agree with that. And such words of wisdom, so powerful. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Rita, and sharing everything with us. Excited to have met you. It honestly was a pleasure hearing your perspective, your point of view. And I'm excited to support your work and, get your book. And all of you all, please go follow her. Please get her book. When does your book come out?
I think we're shooting for mid-May right now. It's in pre-order and it'll come out in the mid-May. But between now and mid-May, you can definitely purchase it. And thank you for having me on the show. I really enjoyed your questions and your presence. It was a
Awesome.
really great conversation. Thank you. An
Awesome. My
honor.
pleasure. Well, we hope to have you back,
Mhm.
at some point and have another interview. Is there anything else that you have in the works that we can expect from you coming up outside of your book?
Um, wow, that's a great question. So I have some children's books I've been playing with that I
Oh,
probably will put out as soon as possible that are about just how do we face our own feelings and let them go.
oh,
Because as you understood from the conversation we had, I think that's we need to stop numbing ourselves. Like I
yeah,
think that's the core of all oppression is us numbing ourselves.
yeah.
And then I have another manuscript which is in the lion's mouth how the U.S. system kidnaps children, which is on families who have lost their children to foster care, in particular mothers who lost their children to foster care and are fighting to get them back. So
Wow,
I don't have a publisher for that book yet. That's been my life's work of 20 years now, and
wow,
I'm waiting for the right publisher for that work. So at
wow.
some point, I don't have a timeline for that, but at some point, I'm looking forward, and the mothers are looking forward to that
I'm
being
sure.
completed.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That touched me in a different way. I am a foster mom of 10 years to two beautiful girls.
Mm,
Um, so I really pray that, you're able to get that work out. I think that's super cool. Well, thank you
thank
so much,
you.
Dr. Rita.
It
Thanks
was
for being with
gorgeous to be
us.
with you. It was
Yes,
really gorgeous to
gorgeous
be
to be
with you.
with
Thank you.
you.
Really
Same
sweet.
here. And so very nice meeting you. Hope this won't be the last time. You have a great night. Don't forget, everybody, go and follow Dr. Rita Fierro. She is awesome. You have a good night.
You do the same. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. Good night, everybody.